It was 2016, and I had walked into my first corporate internship. It was one of the largest multi-channel networks at the time, innovating in a growing new industry called influencer marketing. I was nervous and felt like an imposter. I did not know at the time that I'd go on to achieve all the major career milestones I set for myself in this industry, and yet I would still manage to burn out and eventually disappear, hoping to never have to come back. But let's back up for a second. This is actually a story about what it means to be lucky. You see, I was the kind of kid who barely scraped by year after year. I copied all my homework, cheated on exams, failed a few classes, got into trouble, and spent a lot of time in detention. Still, I managed to graduate with a scholarship to college, and more importantly, they still let me go to prom. I like to think I worked the system, but my friends would describe me as a character in a video game that started life with a maxed out luck stat instead of investing points into stats like strength or wisdom. It never felt like a compliment. Despite my struggles in school, I always excelled at the arts. I got into playing drums in high school and started my first band. We called ourselves Litmus. It was at this time I started to mess around with cameras. I would keep a camcorder running during band practice and would later create music videos out of the recordings. I cringe out of my soul looking at some of these videos now, but I give my younger self a lot of credit for having the courage to make music videos for a band that played in my mom's basement. I went on to take college film classes while I was still in high school. The program was called College Now, and it was administered by CUNY, the City University of New York. While my peers were preparing for their SATs, I spent that summer making movies. The class would get to showcase our work at a big event called the Summer Arts Festival. My team's film was saved for last, and in my humble, unbiased opinion, it was one of the best films of the class. I decided to enter another film festival when I was in college, called Campus Movie Fest. At the time, I worked as an English teacher at a growing chain of tutorials in New York City called Khan's Tutorial. My manager had a passion for the screen. I decided to cast him as the lead in my movie. It was a gritty crime thriller where I was a gangster who terrorized local businesses and was on the run from the cops. The scope of this movie was much bigger than anything I'd done prior. I had an actual set with solid camera work and a substantive plot. I was stoked for the premiere, where all the winning entries would get showcased. I remember showing up and waiting through many student films. The more time went by, the more I started to believe that they had once again saved my film for last, and I was going to win the Campus Movie Fest. Not only did I lose, but they never even allowed my movie to premiere. I later learned that they don't accept movies with vulgarity and violence. I thought that was the end of it. I'd just go back to playing video games and never revisit this again. Then, I got lucky. The tutorial chain I worked for gave me a call. They saw the movie and wanted me to shoot their next ad campaign. That is how I landed my first freelance gig. I borrowed my girlfriend's DSLR, an old Canon T2i, and shot the whole thing. If you saw any of the Khan's tutorial ads running on TV back in the day, that was me. I used that first paycheck to buy my very own DSLR. I shot a wedding for a friend, worked with an up-and-coming dance studio, did some portrait work, and shot some runway shows. Oh, and I worked on a project involving Neil Gaiman, but had no clue who he was at the time. I used the money from these gigs to buy an engagement ring, and at the young age of 25, with no real job or a way to support myself, I proposed to my girlfriend. She said yes, and I felt like the luckiest man on the planet. The year was now 2016, and the influencer era had just started to pick up steam. My fiancée saw that makeup influencers were getting free makeup sent to them by brand PR teams. She wanted to take a stab at content creation to score some free makeup. We both built a studio in our apartment in Jamaica, Queens, and I helped her shoot her first makeup tutorial. Helping her work on these videos made me realize that I could take a stab at my own creator dreams. So one day, I sat down and scribbled Alpha Nerd on a sheet of paper, stuck it on a background, and started filming. I went on to produce 8 episodes over 8 weeks. Not a single video broke 100 views, and my biggest fan was my best friend Alan, but I was having the time of my life. Then, I was sitting in grad school one day, and during my marketing class, our professor brought in a guest lecturer. He was an expert in the new world of influencer marketing, and while I was inclined to take naps through some of my classes, that day I was enthralled by what he had to say. Although I majored in finance, I had no real passion for the industry. I was watching Mad Men at the time, and took a lot of inspiration from Peggy Olson, who despite her humble beginnings, went on to outshine her mentor, Don Draper, and I dreamed of what it would be like to one day work in the ad industry. While I was making YouTube videos at home, I was now learning about how creators actually made money, and I knew immediately that this was my shot. After the presentation, I walked over to the guest lecturer and asked if they were hiring. They only had unpaid internships, and although I needed money to support myself and hopefully pay for a wedding one day, I applied for the internship. I remember the interview vividly. I walked into the office fully suited up and dressed to impress, only to find that everyone here dressed business casual, and I stuck out like a sore thumb who was trying way too hard. I remember thinking, wow, things have really changed since Mad Men. I had the initial round of interviews before I met the final boss who determined my fate. We talked about creators who inspired me and had a lengthy discussion about Casey Neistat and Phil DeFranco. I told him about my YouTube channel, and the final boss decided to give me a final test. I was asked to describe how I'd collaborate with the brand on my own channel. I knew this was a do-nothing task. He just wanted to test me to see if I cared enough to do the assignment, but I actually cared and wanted to seize this opportunity, so I decided I would try very hard to make an impression. I was supposed to hang out with my friends that night and play Street Fighter V, which had recently come out. On the ride home from the interview, I conceptualized a video that blended the emerging hot pepper challenge genre with fighting games. As I went home that day, I picked up 2 habanero peppers, and this is how Hot Pepper Fight Club was born. Some have described luck as what happens when preparation meets opportunity, and I knew I would have to muster my creative capabilities, gaming background, and marketing knowledge to create something that would leave an impression. Me and my best friend Alan downed the habanero peppers and kicked off a Ryu vs. Ken match in Street Fighter. The hypothetical brand that was sponsoring this video was Yoo-Hoo. Yeah, the chocolate milk brand. Random, I know, but it fit perfectly as the drink of choice for someone who just downed a habanero pepper. There's only one Yoo-Hoo bottle, and it would go to the winner. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I started to sweat profusely and began to have the chills. My face even turned red. If you couldn't tell, I'm brown, and it takes a lot for a brown man to turn red. Little did I know, that night would change my life forever. We smoked and drank, and after my friends passed out, I sat down and edited the video in a single night. I sent over the presentation and included a link to the video at the end. The presentation was good enough on its own, but I included the video to really showcase what I could do with a camera. For once in my life, I was confident I over-delivered. When I finally got the job, I no longer felt lucky. I felt like I had earned this, and I did it with all the life skills I picked up along the way. That is how I broke into the corporate world of influencer marketing as a guy with a camera and no real job experience. There are many talented people who never get the opportunities they deserve because although they are prepared, they never have the good fortune to run into the right people. By comparison, I was very lucky. Thank you for watching.
Well, that's gonna be all for Alpha Nerd this week. Don't share or subscribe. Don't even like my video.